kind of wild, isn't it? Even the absolute best chess players, grandmasters, can completely miss simple tactics. Like that Carlsen endgame. Both just overlooked a basic knight fork in an endgame. Looked totally quiet.
Yeah, it really did. And the reason apparently was they just weren't expecting a tactic there. It wasn't on their radar for that type of position.
Which is humbling, right?
Right.
It shows how anyone can have these blind spots.
Absolutely. That example nails a key challenge for every chess player, really. How do we get better at seeing what's possible, even when it's not screamingly obvious? It's more than just knowing the patterns. It's about cultivating this kind of constant tactical alertness.
And that is exactly what we're digging into today. We had a listener ask about improving their study habits, specifically using Davorin Kuljasevic's book, How to Study Chess on Your Own Workbook, Vol. 1. So our mission here is to pull out the really valuable stuff from that workbook, the methods that can help you train more effectively, avoid the usual traps. And it's not just about solving standard puzzles, is it? The book seems to push for mimicking actual game decisions.
Precisely. That's the key difference. It shifts the focus. Instead of just finding a win when you know it's there, like in a puzzle, it's about developing the skills you actually need in a live game, where tactics and strategies are often, disguised. It forces a much more active, analytical approach.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The workbook seems built around 3 main training areas relevant for us: tactics, middle game, and end game. It does mention openings and general improvement, but the exercises really hammer these 3. So where do we start?
I think the logical place, and something the book hits hard right away, is visualization. It's often overlooked, maybe. Kuljasevic calls it the core skill. And I think that comparison to core exercises in, weightlifting is spot on.
Right. You wouldn't try a heavy lift without a strong core.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So if your chess visualization is shaky, what happens? What are the consequences?
Well, thankfully, no pulled muscles, but poor visualization leads straight to mischances and, frankly, blunders. The book gives this pretty striking example of a FID master rated over 2,300, which is strong, very strong amateur.
Yeah, definitely.
This player, after a break, made some really basic mistakes in a tournament. 2 specific ones stood out. One was playing RxE6, thinking a piece was pinned when it wasn't, losing an exchange, just didn't see it correctly.
Wow.
And another in a winning bishop endgame, playing BD3+, and just completely missing that the opponent could then grab his pawn. Total oversight.
Wow. Okay, so even at that level, it really drives home that visualization isn't just for beginners.
Not at all. And that's why the workbook has a whole chapter called the Visualization Bootcamp. A key technique in there is the blindfold woodpecker method.
Blindfold woodpecker.
Ah.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. What is that?
Yeah, sounds a bit intense. But the idea is you repeatedly work through 8 specific exercises, all focused on the basic geometry of the board. Things like squares, diagonals, files, ranks, how knights move. But you do it in your head, ideally, no board.
Without looking at a board, okay.
Right. You cycle through them again and again, trying to get faster and more accurate. The goal is building that strong mental map of the board. Because, so many tactics come from unexpected piece placements or routes, and you'll spot those much easier if your mental vision is sharp.
So like mental drills for seeing the board's layout instantly. What kinds of exercises are we talking about?
The boot camp has things like counting light or dark squares in a sequence, mentally connecting squares along a bishop's path, figuring out where a file and a diagonal intersect, finding missing squares on a knight's tour, recognizing geometric shapes, seeing all available squares for a piece, even visualizing how to stop a pawn promoting. It's all about that static geometry first.
Sounds like a proper workout for the mind's eye.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give a concrete example? Like, what's one specific task?
Sure. Exercise 1 might ask something like, how many light squares are in this set? C3, A6, B7, F7, D4, G4.
Okay. Let me think. C3 light, A6 light, B7 dark, F7 dark, D4 light, D4 dark.
Yeah. So 3. Wait, no.
Hey, see? It takes focus. The answer is 4. C3, A6, D4, G4 are light.
Ah, okay. Right. Got it.
Or another, exercise 5 might give a knight path like D4, C6, E6, G8, F7, H6, and ask if any squares are missing on that direct route. In that specific one, none are missing, but other examples would have gaps you need to spot mentally.
I see. It's really drilling those fundamental spatial relationships. And the woodpecker name implies repetition. Lots of it. Exactly that. Repetition is key. Kuljasevic suggests cycling through these 8 exercises repeatedly until you can nail them quickly and accurately, all in your head. He offers a few ways to fit it in. You could dedicate a solid week or 2 just to the boot camp, Or maybe do a cycle as a warm-up before other chess training. Or even just, set a timer for 10-15 minutes each day and see how many you get through.
Flexibility is good.
Yeah, but the main thing is consistency. That regular repetition is what builds and solidifies those neural pathways for board vision.
Makes perfect sense. Build that strong foundation, that clear mental picture. And then the more complex stuff, tactics, strategy, becomes more reliable. Okay, so visualization is crucial. What's the next big idea from the workbook?
Well, moving on from seeing the board clearly, the book really emphasizes tactics training that goes beyond the standard stuff. The white to move and win, puzzles everyone does.
Right, those are everywhere.
Yeah.
What's the problem with them, though? They seem helpful.
They are helpful, to a point. For pattern recognition, absolutely. But the big limitation for real game improvement is they tell you there's a tactic. They hand it to you on a plate, basically.
Ah, okay. In a real game, there's no flashing sign saying tactic here.
Exactly. Opportunities are often hidden, sometimes in positions that look completely calm. Like that Carlsen and Endgame we mentioned right at the start. That tactic wasn't obvious at all.
Good point. So how does the workbook help train for that situation? Finding the hidden ones.
It uses a method called find a hidden tactic. The exercises present positions that look like they're straight out of a real game. And crucially, it's not immediately clear if there is a tactic or for which side. You have to analyze, assess, and decide if something's lurking under the surface.
So it develops that kind of tactical radar, that spidey sense that maybe, just maybe, something's possible here.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. And one concept the book links to this is the idea of contact between pieces. It gives an example. I think black plays bc8, looks quiet, maybe defensive, but it puts the bishop in contact with a white knight on f5.
Meaning it's now attacking or defending squares near the knight.
Essentially, yeah, it's within range. It creates this sort of latent vulnerability. Later in the example, black exploits this with a surprising knight sacrifice that works because of that earlier bishop move. The idea is when pieces are in contact, even if they're defended for now, they become potential targets if defenders get removed or distracted.
That's a subtle but powerful idea, looking beyond immediate threats to potential future clashes based on piece proximity. Interesting. The workbook also has scoring for the tactics section, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, which I think is great for accountability. Each of the 5 tactical training sets has points you earn. You get points for finding the right moves, but also for correctly analyzing the key variations that follow.
So it pushes you to be thorough.
Exactly. Then you tally up your score, and there's a grading scale that kind of links your percentage score to approximate FIDE ELO ratings. Like 0 to 49% might correspond roughly to 1800, 1900 ELO, and so on.
That's a neat way to track progress and see where you stand tactically.
Yeah, it provides some concrete feedback. And I also saw mention of tactical analysis exercises. How are those different?
Those push things even further. Instead of just finding the move, you're given a position and asked to analyze specific critical variations. For example, white to move, analyze the consequences of playing, say, 19.nxe5 by looking at maybe 4 different replies black might have. It's about really training that deep branching calculation skill needed for complex tactics. So not just the first shot, but understanding the follow-up, the refutations, the whole sequence. Okay, visualization sharp, tactics trained for real game scenarios. What about strategy? The middle game.
Right, the Middlegame module. This uses mainly 2 types of exercises. Find a mini plan and Middlegame simulations. The find a mini plan idea is really cool, I think. Instead of just one move or short tactic, you get a middle game position. Your job is to figure out the best positional idea, like improving a piece, grabbing an outpost, making good pawn moves, and then find a sequence of moves to achieve it.
Ah, so formulating a short-term strategic goal and then actually executing it over several moves.
Exactly. And it's different from tactics because you're often giving an answer for each move in the sequence, reacting to what you think the opponent will do. It's very step-by-step, strategic execution. The book shows an example where black plays 15.a4. Seems small, just a pawn move, but it achieves several things. Creates an outpost, restricts white's bishop, fixes a potential weakness, multiple positional pluses from one idea.
That sounds like it really forces you to think strategically, beyond just the immediate calculation, and the feedback must be crucial there.
Oh, absolutely. Kuljasevic stresses that the solutions provide detailed feedback, almost like a mini lesson on middle game strategy with each exercise. Even if your plan wasn't the very best, the explanations cover alternatives and point out common strategic mistakes in that kind of position. Really helps you learn the why.
Like reading a good annotated game, but you're actively involved. Okay, and the other type was middle game simulations. How do they build strategy?
Right, simulations. Here you get a game from strong players, starting at a key middle game moment. Your task is to guess the move the master actually played. It's a fantastic way to learn, whether you guess right or wrong. Guess right, great, you're thinking along the right strategic lines.
And if you guess wrong?
You learn from the actual move played and, importantly, the reasoning behind it, which is usually explained. The book mentions these simulations often focus on similar positional and strategic themes as the find a mini plan exercises.
So you're trying to get inside the heads of top players.
Mhm.
Like trying to guess Lasker's move in one example, I think.
Precisely. You're trying to anticipate moves from players like Lasker, Alekine, Petrosian, even Carlsen in these instructive middle games. It really helps internalize good strategic principles and develop your own feel for strong, purposeful moves. And like the tactics part, there's scoring here too to track how well you're doing.
All right, this is building up nicely. We've got visualization, realistic tactics, middle game strategy, which brings us to the end game. Often feared, often decisive. How does the workbook tackle this phase?
The endgame module is structured really well, I think. It's thematic. Each of the 5 training sets focuses on a specific common type of endgame, like basic pawn endgames, knight endgames, bishop ones, rook endgames, and then even more advanced rook endings.
Well, that's smart. Breaking it down by theme makes it less overwhelming, probably.
Definitely. It lets you build understanding systematically. And within those themes, there are 3 main exercise types. Endgame analysis positions, endgame simulations, similar idea to the middle game ones, but for endgames, and something called endgame training positions.
Okay, analysis and simulation sound similar to the other sections, presumably scored exercises.
Correct. Those are scored. They encourage deep analysis and making informed guesses about the best continuation.
But these endgame training positions, they aren't scored. What's their role then?
Their role is purely practical application. You get an endgame position, and the idea is to actually play it out. Against a sparring partner, ideally someone around your strength, or a coach, or even an engine.
Bridging the gap between knowing the theory and actually being able to execute it under pressure.
Exactly that. The goal isn't necessarily to find the single perfect theoretical move every time, but to practice applying the general winning or drawing plan in a simulated game. You play it out, then compare how your game went against the solution or analysis provided, focusing on the key ideas you needed to implement.
So it's like targeted sparring practice for specific endgames. Makes sense.
Yeah, the book gives an example of queen versus rook and says, okay, play this out. Try to win with the queen or try to hold with the rook. It's about getting that practical feel through actually playing.
And I assume the analysis and simulation parts still have scoring.
Yes, those scored exercises are still there to test your concrete knowledge and calculation within the endgames.
This workbook sounds incredibly thorough. It really seems to cover the skills needed for each phase in a practical way. How does it suggest fitting all this together, structuring your training?
Well, that structure, we talked about the modules, and then the 5 sets of 8 exercises in each gives you a lot of flexibility.
Right, you're not locked into one rigid path.
Not at all. You can really tailor it. You could focus just on tactics for a week if that's your weak spot.
Yeah.
Or you could mix it up, maybe do 1 set from tactics, 1 from middle game, 1 from end game over, say, a week for a balanced approach.
So you could align it with your own assessment of your strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely. Or use it to supplement other study. If you're reading up on rook endgames, you could then tackle the rook endgame set in the workbook to practice. It integrates well.
Very adaptable. And it also mentioned working with an analysis partner.
Yes, which is a great suggestion, especially for the tougher exercises. Bouncing ideas off someone, getting feedback, even just having someone to keep you motivated, it can make a big difference.
2 heads are better than 1 sometimes.
Can be, yeah.
No.
It helps you catch things you might miss on your own. And Kuljasevic wraps up by quoting GM R.B. Ramesh about hard work and perseverance. A good reminder that ultimately improvement comes from consistent effort.
No magic bullets, just smart work. Okay, well, this deep dive has been really insightful. Let's try to summarize the key takeaways. We've seen practical methods from Kuljasevic's workbook focusing on visualization. That blindfold woodpecker sounds intense but useful.
Then training tactical alertness in more realistic game-like ways, not just standard puzzles.
Developing strategic thinking with those mini-plan exercises and the simulations.
And finally, applying endgame knowledge practically, not just theoretically, using those training positions.
The real value here, it seems, is moving beyond rote learning. It's about building the actual skills you need during a game.
Exactly. Spotting hidden chances, making solid plans, navigating the whole game more effectively.
So for you listening, here's a thought. What if you consciously tried incorporating just one of these methods? Maybe that blindfold woodpecker drill. Try it for just, say, 2 weeks. See if it subtly sharpens your board vision, your calculation in your actual games. And maybe think broader, too. What other core skills in your life, outside of chess, could benefit from that kind of focused, repetitive, deliberate practice? Definitely something to chew on.